Imagine a world where kids rode bikes without helmets, moms cooked everything in Jell-O molds, and your television had 3 channels, if you were lucky. There were no smartphones, no seatbelts, and no microwaves. And yet somehow, life in 1950s America felt full. This isn't just a stroll down memory lane. It's a dive into a time capsule bursting with moments that today's generation wouldn't even recognize. From duck and cover drills to soda fountains, this was a decade where everything felt both incredibly simple and wildly strange by modern standards. And get this, you could buy a candy bar for 5 cents, your teacher could swat you with a paddle, and milk was delivered straight to your door in glass bottles. We're talking about a time before suburban sprawl took over, when drive-in theaters were the place to be and no one locked their front doors. In this video, we're uncovering 50 completely forgotten things from growing up in 1950s America. Some of these you'll remember vividly. Others might make you say, "Wait, we did what?" But the best part? As we count them down, you'll feel like you're right back there, in the passenger seat of a Studebaker, drinking a root beer float with the Platters on the radio. Stick around, because the further down the list we go, the crazier the memories get. And number 48, that one will blow your mind. Step inside a typical 1950s American home, and you'll immediately notice everything was plastic, loud, or floral. Let's start with the furniture. If you sat on your grandmother's couch and made a squeaky noise, it wasn't you. It was the clear plastic slipcovers stretched tight over the upholstery. That was normal. Every living room had them. You'd stick to them in the summer and slide off in the winter. And speaking of the living room, the TV console was a centerpiece, not just some device. These things were huge, built into polished wood cabinets, sometimes with radios or record players included. And on top, likely a doily, a family photo, and a bowl of hard candy that no one ever actually ate. The kitchen was a pastel wonderland. Think mint green or baby pink appliances, linoleum floors with wild geometric patterns, and Formica countertops that could survive the apocalypse. If you had a pink-tiled bathroom, you were living large. You'd find a Betty Crocker cookbook on the counter, right next to the electric can opener and maybe a shiny new toaster. These weren't just tools, they were futuristic marvels. Housewives were bombarded with ads for things like Miracle Whip, Tang, and instant pudding. And don't forget the Jell-O molds with everything from carrots to shrimp suspended inside. Yep, it was a thing. Homes had milk chutes or boxes where glass bottles were delivered each morning. The clink of bottles was part of the soundtrack of suburban life. And in the garage, a car with tail fins and a dashboard made of steel. Kids played in the driveway while Dad mowed the lawn with a push mower, puffing a cigarette and waving to neighbors. Phones were rotary and usually had party lines, meaning if you picked up and heard someone else talking, that wasn't a glitch, it was your neighbor. And the decor? Think naughty pine paneling, floral curtains, and those weird flying duck wall hangings. Life at home in the 50s was a cocktail of post-war optimism and quirky design, and every home had its own rhythm. But together, they created a vibe that's completely vanished from today's digital world. And wait until you hear what kids were doing in school. Up next, duck and cover drills, chalkboard mischief, and Saturday cartoons you had to fight for. All right, picture this. You're sitting in a row of wooden desks, your feet barely touching the floor. The chalkboard squeaks in the background, and your teacher is rolling in a film projector. But it's not a nature documentary. It's a civil defense film showing a cartoon turtle telling you to duck and cover in case of a nuclear bomb. Yeah, that was real life in 1950s schools. Kids back then weren't just learning math and cursive. They were learning how to survive the bomb. At least once a month, students practiced hiding under desks or lining up along the hallway walls, hands over their heads. It sounds wild now, but during the Cold War, that was just Tuesday. Reading lessons came from Dick and Jane books. These wholesome picture books taught kids to read with lines like "See Spot Run," simple, repetitive, and everywhere. Over 80% of American first graders used them. And for math, no calculators. You had a chalkboard, your fingers, and maybe some wooden counting blocks. But once the school bell rang, it was time for freedom. If you were lucky enough to have a TV, you'd rush home to catch shows like Howdy Doody, Lassie, or the Mickey Mouse Club. But Saturday morning, that was the gold mine. Cartoons like Popeye, Looney Tunes, and Mighty Mouse lit up the black and white screen. No streaming, no DVR. If you missed it, too bad. Movies were a whole event. Kids would go to Saturday matinees for a few coins and spend hours watching double features, short films, and newsreels. You'd get cartoons, cowboys, aliens, and sometimes a monster movie that gave you nightmares for weeks. And don't forget the popcorn. It cost a dime and came in boxes bigger than your head. Outside, entertainment meant imagination. Kids played stickball in the street, built soapbox racers, and made up entire worlds with marbles, jacks, and jump ropes. Play was unstructured, and the only rule was be home by dark. And let's not skip the library card. This was your golden ticket to Nancy Drew Mysteries, Hardy Boys Adventures, and everything in between. The smell of old books, the stamp at the checkout desk, these were real-world experiences, not digital downloads. Even school supplies had a vibe. Metal lunchboxes with cartoon characters, thermoses that always smelled a little off, and pencil boxes with built-in sharpeners. And yeah, you could get sent to the principal's office for chewing gum or talking back. And corporal punishment wasn't just allowed, it was expected. The 50s weren't perfect, but for kids, it was a unique mix of order, adventure, and analog magic. Next up, let's talk pompadours, poodle skirts, and the wild teen energy that exploded across the decade. Welcome to the era where Grease was cool, skirts could twirl like tornadoes, and every teen looked like they were ready to either dance at the sock hop, or go to the sock hop, or rumble in a parking lot. Let's start with the ladies. The 1950s teenage girl's uniform, the iconic poodle skirt, a wide felt circle skirt, often with a poodle applique stitched on the side. Pair it with a tucked-in blouse, cinch it at the waist with a belt, add a cardigan, bobby socks, and saddle shoes. Boom! Instant teen fashion. And the hair? It was a work of art. Girls wrapped their curls in sponge rollers overnight, teased their bangs into bouffants, and tied everything up with bright scarves or headbands. Makeup was light, but that red lipstick? Non-negotiable. Now let's talk about the boys, or rather, the greasers. Inspired by movies like Rebel Without a Cause and The Wild One, teen boys embraced the bad boy look. Slicked back pompadours, leather jackets, rolled up jeans, and white tees with cigarette packs tucked in the sleeve. Even if you didn't smoke, the look was the statement. Music was everything. Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and Little Richard blasted from jukeboxes and transistor radios. Teenagers weren't just dressing differently, they were becoming their own culture, breaking away from their parents' generation. Dance crazes like the jitterbug, the stroll, and the hand jive lit up school gyms during sock hops, where shoes were literally left at the door to protect the hardwood floor. And yes, those events were chaperoned like Fort Knox. But it wasn't all rebellion. There was also a wholesome, clean-cut look, too. Boys in sweater vests, girls in matching twin sets, everyone looking photo-ready at all times. Even the yearbook photos looked like headshots for Hollywood. Fashion in the 50s wasn't just about clothes. It was about identity. Teens were carving out a place of their own in a world still run by grown-ups who didn't understand rock and roll or drive-in movies. And next, we're going to see just how wild life could get outside the house, from walking to school alone to piling into a car at the local drive-in. Back in the 1950s, the world felt smaller, but also a whole lot freer. Kids didn't need GPS, smartphones, or even parents trailing behind them. You just grabbed your lunch pail, maybe a jacket, and walked to school, alone. Rain? Snow? Didn't matter. Some kids trekked miles each way. No one batted an eye. And the neighborhood? That was your universe. Every street had its own gang of kids. You played stickball until sunset, built forts in empty lots, and yelled, "Car!" every time a Chevy rolled through your game. No one texted to come outside. You just showed up. Neighbors knew each other by name. If you got out of line, Mrs. Johnson down the street could scold you, and your mom would thank her for it. There was an unwritten rule. Every adult was your parent when needed. Now let's talk about the holy grail of weekend fun, drive-in theaters. These weren't just movie nights. They were entire events. Families loaded into giant steel cars with blankets, snacks, and a speaker you hooked onto your window. You watched movies under the stars while mosquitoes tried to eat you alive, and it was magical. Teenagers, though, they had other plans. Drive-ins were date central, the place where young love bloomed and rules were bent. Think steamy windows, greasy cheeseburgers from the concession stand, and maybe a monster movie playing in the background that no one actually watched. Weekends also meant block parties, potlucks, and church picnics. No DJs, no fancy lights, just someone's dad with a record player and a cooler full of Coca-Cola. Stores were mom and pop owned. The corner store clerk knew your name and your candy preferences. 5 cents could buy you a handful of Jawbreakers, a comic book, and a stick of gum. There was a slower pace to life. People sat on porches, waved to passing cars, and left their front doors unlocked. Imagine that today. This was a time when kids roamed free, adults watched out for everyone's children, and community meant everything. But the culture wasn't just local, it was national. Coming up next, how soda pop, TV jingles, and rock and roll created a pop culture boom unlike anything before it. If you want to understand the soul of the 1950s, just walk into a soda shop, drop a coin in the jukebox, and listen as Elvis starts to shake the walls. This was the golden age of pop culture, where everything felt brand new, and kids soaked it up like root beer through a paper straw. Let's start with prices, because they'll blow your mind. A candy bar cost a nickel, a soda was 10 cents, and gasoline? About 25 cents a gallon. You could literally fill up your car and still have enough left for a burger and fries. And those burgers? You got them at diners with chrome bar stools, neon signs, and waitresses on roller skates. You'd order a malt or a cherry Coke, and the jukebox would play songs by Buddy Holly or the Platters. It was cheap, delicious, and downright cool. At home, families would gather around the TV, and we're talking one TV in black and white with maybe 3 channels. If you were lucky, you had rabbit ear antennas and maybe a roll of foil to make the signal clearer. Shows like Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy, Gunsmoke, and The Ed Sullivan Show shaped what America thought was normal. When Elvis first performed on TV, it was such a big deal that some networks only showed him from the waist up. Seriously. Music, fashion, slang, it all spread through radio, jukeboxes, and TV like wildfire. Kids learned new dance moves from American Bandstand, mimicked teen idols, and begged for the latest vinyl records to play on their portable turntables. Toys exploded in popularity too. This was the decade of the hula hoop, Slinky, Mr. Potato Head, and Tonka trucks. No screens, no apps, just simple joy. Even board games were having a moment. Clue, Monopoly, Sorry. All staples of a rainy afternoon. And let's not forget comic books. Superman, Batman, and Archie filled spinning racks at corner stores, sparking kids' imaginations. Parents didn't always love them. Some thought comics would rot your brain, but kids couldn't get enough. Even advertising was becoming an art. TV jingles were catchy as heck, and cereal mascots like Tony the Tiger and Snap, Crackle, and Pop became celebrities in their own right. Everything felt exciting. The 1950s were an explosion of mass media, teen identity, and unforgettable trends. It was a time when you weren't just watching culture, you were part of it. But not everything in the 50s was light and easy. Next, we take a short pause to remember what often gets left out of the nostalgia. Here's the thing about nostalgia. It has a selective memory. Yes, the 1950s were filled with charm, innocence, and unforgettable moments. But behind the soda fountains and sitcoms, it was also a time of deep inequality, rigid gender roles, and racial segregation. Not everyone got to live the American dream. Women were expected to stay home. People of color faced harsh discrimination. And mental health, abuse, or trauma almost never talked about. It's okay to celebrate the sweet parts, but we should also remember the full picture. Now, let's wrap it all up with a look back. There you have it, 50 forgotten things from growing up in 1950s America. From plastic-covered couches to penny candy and drive-in movies, we've traveled back to a time when life was slower, simpler, and full of quirks we'll never see again. If any of this brought back memories, or made you realize how different life used to be, let us know in the comments. Drop your favorite forgotten thing from the 50s below. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a trip back in time. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.